So, very warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new edition today, of course, our program bringing you all the latest news and events happening from the Black Continent. My name is Angie Meher and I'll be joining you for today's edition. And of course, we start straight away with a look at some of the news making the headlines, starting with a plane that was carrying a delegation of government officials from Robert Mugabe has left Zimbabwe for Singapore on Monday to retrieve the body of the former president for his burial. A state funeral is to be held in Mugabe's honor on Saturday at the National Sports Stadium in Harare. More details.
A plane has left Zimbabwe for Singapore carrying government officials and relatives to bring home the body of Robert Mugabe, but it was still not clear where the former leader would be buried. Mugabe's family is pushing back against the government plan to bury him at the National Heroes Egg Monument in Harare and wants him to be buried in his home village. Louis Mugabe, the late president's nephew and family spokesman, said a charter plane left Harare for Singapore on Monday. Mugabe's body was expected to arrive in Zimbabwe on Wednesday. Mugabe died on Friday, aged 95, in Singapore, where he had long received medical treatment. He had dominated Zimbabwean politics for almost 4 decades from independence in 1980. The Zimbabwean government said in a memo sent to embassies that it would hold a state funeral for Mugabe in the National Sports Stadium next Saturday with a burial ceremony on Sunday, but it did not say where the burial would be.
And continuing with our news, a major medical report has said that the world could be free of malaria, one of the oldest and deadliest diseases to affect humanity. Each year, there are still more than 200 million cases of the disease, which mostly kills young children. More details in this story.
Global health experts said that malaria can be eradicated within a generation. In a major report, 41 specialists said a future free of malaria, one of the world's oldest and deadliest disease, can be achieved as early as 2050. This contradicted the conclusion last month of a malaria review by the World Health Organization, and the experts urged the WHO not to shy anyway from this goal of the epic proportions. The report added that to meet the target, however, governments, scientists and public health leaders need to inject more money and innovation into fighting the disease and the mosquitoes that carry it. The view comes a few weeks after the WHO published its own report on whether malaria can be wiped out, concluding that eradication cannot be achieved soon, and that setting unrealistic goals with unknown costs and endpoints could lead to frustration and backlashes. In contrast to the global report, the WHO report said that priority now should be lay the groundwork for future eradication while guarding against the risk of the failure. Malaria infected about 219 million people in 2017 and killed around 4,500 of them, the vast majority babies and children in the poorest parts of Africa. Due to ongoing transmission, half of the world's population is still at risk of contracting malaria, and globally it kills a child every 2 minutes. These figures are little changed from 2016, but globally case numbers had previously fallen steadily from 239 million in 2010 to 214 million in 2015, and death from 6,700 to around 500,000 from 2010 till 2013.
And continuing with our news, the Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry on Monday called for more support for Sudan's new civilian-led government, including getting the African country off the U.S. list of countries sponsoring terrorism. Shoukry said Egypt is now working with Washington to end Sudan's international status. We have more details in this report and we'll be right back for a further depth discussion. Stay tuned.
Sudan's Foreign Minister Asma Mohamed Abdullah asserted the special and long-lasting relations between Sudan and Egypt, expressing her appreciation for Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry's visit to Sudan. During his visit to Sudan, Shukri met with his Sudanese counterpart, Asma Mohamed Abdullah, and Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdouk. In a press conference, Shukri stressed Egypt's full support for the new Sudanese government. Earlier, during a meeting with Prime Minister Hamdouk in Khartoum, both parties discussed different means of enhancing bilateral cooperation and supporting Sudan at the transitional phase. Shukri congratulated the new premier on his post and on announcing the new Sudanese cabinet, which reflects the country's success to overcome such critical phase and start a new stage full of prosperity, growth for Sudanese people. The two sides reviewed the activities of the joint technical committees, including the files of the Nile water, river transport, foodstuff, and others, with aim of boosting cooperation and coordination in facing common challenges. Shukri also said that Egypt will send relief aid to the flood-stricken areas, adding that the Sudanese official expressed appreciation of the distinguished relations between the two countries. He also reviewed the priorities of the new government during the transitional phase and stressed the need to strengthen regional and international relations at this stage, particularly strategic ones with Egypt for the best interest of the both peoples. For her part, Sudanese Foreign Minister Asma Abdullah said during the meetings that relations between Egypt and Sudan are historic due to religion and language ties. Abdullah thanked the Egyptian people and government for supporting Sudan and its people in their choices and their will in outlining their future and maintaining the ties among the Nile River peoples. Shukri stressed the need to enhance political and institutional cooperation to help achieve stability, particularly aimed the conflicts in Libya and Horn of Africa, not to mention the spread of terrorism. Shukri also touched upon bilateral cooperation with Sudan in many fields, referring to the electricity linkage between the two Arab countries that is scheduled to go into the effect in October. Shukri invited the Sudanese foreign minister to visit Egypt as soon as possible to continue their political negotiations.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm delighted to be joined over the telephone by His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the former Assistant to the Foreign Minister. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Yes, good afternoon to you.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, now we just saw the Foreign Minister urging the United States to take Sudan off the list of countries sponsoring terrorism and working with Egypt to end the international status that has been given to Sudan over its former crisis. How do you see this development, Your Excellency?
Of course, we welcome the development in Sudan. It's going quite well, and Egypt supporting this, of course, by all its means. Do not forget that I am from a generation where we were saluting one flag for Egypt and Sudan with one kingdom, and still we feel this. Egypt is hosting 4 million Sudanese living in Egypt. And the development in Sudan towards better political situation and democracy is encouraging us for the effort to take Sudan out of the list of the countries supporting terrorism, of course. And of course, we have lots to be discussed in a meeting like that between our two foreign ministers.
Mr. Ambassador, do you think this move would support Khartoum during its transitional phase?
Pardon?
I beg your pardon, Mr. Ambassador?
Will you repeat the question? I didn't hear you.
Yes, I'm asking you, sir, if this move to remove Sudan off the list of countries supporting terrorism would support the country during its transitional phase, especially given the positive developments that the country has witnessed.
Absolutely, because it brings back the normal relations with all its neighbors, the normal relations with all its main partners, especially in trade and investment, and we come back to normal life in Sudan. Because don't forget that the international judge, the international criminal jury, were asking for the head of Bashir himself. So this situation is abnormal, and we want to solve it in order to make Sudan a good partner in all the relations with its main partners in the whole world, whether in the Arab field, Africa, and Europe and United States.
Mr. Ambassador, the Foreign Minister reviewed the priorities of the new Sudanese government during the transitional phase. In your opinion, sir, what should the priorities of the new Sudanese government be during this critical stage?
To bring the unity for the people of Sudan behind elected government and a new president, and to be normal life without any part imposing itself on the other parts. That we all of us, all the parties in Sudan should share the responsibility of ruling their own country. And this is, in a simple word, democracy. We have to put this ahead. Second, that Sudan, of course, has its critical problems, economic problems, and financial problems, and we have to help Sudan in order to develop its own country. This is another task. Politically, of course, we have to make our internal home more ready for the opinion and the other opinion in order to take right decisions concerning what we would choose for the future of Sudan.
Mr. Ambassador, of course, as you said, Sir, Egypt has played a very important role for the political triumph that was reached in the Sudanese country. And also we've seen Shukri saying that what the Sudanese people achieved was really a role model achievement in terms of reaching a settlement and signing the deal between the different factions. My question to you, Mr. Ambassador, how do you see Egypt's role, especially in terms of its leadership of the African Union, in mending ties between Sudan and other countries, whether in Africa or in the West?
In Sudan, Egypt is not that only the head of the African Union.
Yes.
Egypt is the big brother of all Sudanese. And as I told you, one day we were one country.
Yes.
And we want to show this all the time. And whenever I am in Khartoum, I don't feel at all that I am a stranger in Sudan. And Egypt has the biggest role any country can play in the world in Sudan.
Yes.
And the good thing that Sudanese respect us and they trust Egypt. And Egypt, of course, has all to help our brothers by all means.
Indeed. Mr. Ambassador, Sudan is a very rich country in terms of resources. How do you see the role that can be played by the new Sudanese ministers in order to get the country back on its feet economically, especially?
Investment is the answer because trade didn't do the job. We supposed to trade and we did everything concerning trade. Now we need to invest. And in this concern, we need foreign capital, foreign direct investment.
Yes.
And this is what we are doing for Egypt and we want to do for Sudan also. But of course, we have to do our homework because the infrastructure in our countries needs to be ameliorated. The banking system needs to be much better. Transport is need great help, education, name it. And let me be frank a little bit, saying that the mass media is not helping us. The mass media is attacking the businessmen all the time, and it is threatening them even. But our president mentioned this several times that he wants the private sector to play its role. If we want this seriously, we have to encourage our businessmen to do their best for the investment, whether in Egypt or in Sudan.
Indeed. And how about the role that security can play as well in order to encourage investment, the priorities that they should put in reaching security in the country, Mr. Ambassador?
It goes vice versa. I mean, investment would help the security.
Yes.
And if we make security much better, then more investment can be encouraged to come to us. So, of course, not only this crime, but we are talking about the organized crime, all the organized crime, whether it is terrorism, money laundering, or drug trafficking, or illegal migration. All these crimes should be tackled seriously in order to make the investment much better.
Indeed. Now, Mr. Ambassador, of course, today the Arab foreign ministers held a consultation meeting ahead of the 152nd ordinary session of the Arab League Ministerial Council, which was attended by the Arab League Secretary General. On the agenda, they discussed the developments in Sudan. How do you see the role and what assistance can Arab countries play in getting Sudan back on its feet?
As a matter of fact, as the Secretary General of the Arab Investors Union, the Arab League asked us to help Sudan in order to bring more and more investment. Because the citizen who has a job, who has some work, he wouldn't think about terrorism of any kind. So investment is the word, and we will really encourage, in the North Sudan, but also in South Sudan. We want all the Sudanese, whether in the North or South, to feel that we are helping them, that we are bringing more capital in order to make a job available for every citizen seeking for jobs and seeking for better life.
Indeed. Mr. Ambassador, also the Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri discussed with General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan the Nile water file. Now, how do you see the new leadership in Sudan dealing with this very important file?
I think the River Nile file, if I may say, I read it carefully, and I think it is a matter of maintaining the dialogue. And we have some few points to convince the River Nile-based countries to follow us. That establishing the Ethiopia pipeline shouldn't affect our resource of water, of course. And the good element here that Ethiopia doesn't use the River Nile. It is a country which depends totally on the rain. So, in practical terms, we are not in a deep disagreement. But I would be happy if I see that the dialogue is continuing, and with a friendly dialogue, we should reach better solutions.
Right. Your Excellency, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the former Assistant to the Foreign Minister, thank you very much, sir, for joining us this afternoon on today's edition of Africa Today. And we end it here, of course, ladies and gentlemen. We do hope you have enjoyed our episode. Many thanks for joining us.